AI. So in some ways, it's shaping the world in bad ways. In some, it's shaping the world in good ways. Specifically, it's kind of shaping the world away from a kind of human-centered care to a more dehumanized setting. So dehumanization is when you remove a human element from some kind of service. And we have a gut reaction to this kind of thing. It's typically bad. Not many people have positive reactions to that. So especially in services where we need them in our most desperate hours, say in times of lengthy hospital stays or in legal battles involving abuse. So the position my co-author and friend Amit Palmer take is that some of these dehumanizing instances are not actually bad, they're actually good. So we argue that in some of these cases, human care is actually what is depreciating the service. Let me start with the premise, since I'm a philosopher. So AI is being used more and more, and it's just getting better and better. And AI can train other AI, so the time horizons on this is just very rapid and ever advancing. So we see the initial gut reaction again to react to this with in trepidation. And we see people getting laid off in service industries such as like the video game industry. And we see that AI is being used to generate content that would be normally generated by humans. We usually think that's bad. In that case, it certainly seems bad. I don't want people to lose their jobs. So it's kind of hard to see what the upshot is here and what the positive benefit of AI is. So the silver lining, I believe, is that it's less shameful to interact with AI. So this might not be initially something that's positive, like how can this be positive? But the shame can, in certain circumstances, inhibit service seeking. Specifically, I'll be talking about the legal context. So let me give you an example just to get the ball rolling. The initial paper that kind of launched this was in 2022 in the Journal of Bioethics. Amit Palmer and David Schwann there argued a similar line. They argued that in certain kinds of hospital settings, AI care or robot care could be seen as a dehumanizing way to be beneficent. I'll give you an example. The example they used was in cases of patient care cleaning. So when patients are disabled, they can often not use the facilities, so they frequently soil themselves. And when they go to request the cleaning service, it's a context that is obviously something that's kind of shameful to admit. It's not blameworthy, obviously, but it's shameful. And they argued there that it would be beneficent to actually replace that service with some kind of robot or AI for the people who want it. So that would seem like a pretty good case for what I'm talking about. So after reading this, I was wondering about what other circumstances AI could be used to implement and achieve this kind of outcome. So intuitively, I just first started thinking about the legal realm and cases where this could be applied. Before we get there, what is shame even? So in the article that me wrote, you can see that shame is kind of a function of cultural norms. Groups can use shame to reinforce norms by stigmatizing certain members. And they can stigmatize it in a couple of ways. They can stigmatize people as being associated with a particular group, and that can cause shame, or they can stigmatize based upon particular kinds of traits or features of the person. This is how kind of the cultural norms can kind of influence our shameful perceptions of the world. So they all kind of interact, and it can all kind of disincentivize and incentivize certain kinds of behaviors that we do on a daily basis. It makes sense that robots and AI are not something that can kind of induce shame in us. It's just intuitive. It's a social emotion. It's something that requires a human to be able to experience some kind of care towards the person. So this is why it actually doesn't cause shame in people when they interact with robots. So back to the legal realm, where can we apply this kind of concept? You might be initially thinking like, wait, the law requires like a sense of justice, and this is intimately related to like a human kind of care, and shame plays a pretty powerful role there, arguably. And you're in good company. Justice Roberts, in his year-end brief, expressed kind of similar remarks, but he didn't totally discredit the usability of AI to kind of bridge, especially inequalities. So he's not all totally skeptical about how AI is going to change the legal realm. I believe this needs to be taken in a kind of case-by-case basis, and replacements need to follow in a kind of stepwise fashion. So, and again, critics usually see this kind of dehumanization as a detraction from the service, but as we just highlighted, it seems to be, in at least a couple cases, a good kind of improvement to the service. And just as a caveat, we're kind of focusing on the defense here, so people who are litigating against, or the plaintiffs, the people who are litigating against the defense. We think it can work in those kinds of cases too, but we're mostly just going to be talking about the plaintiffs here. So the most obvious way to actually use AI to kind of bridge inequalities and break down barriers to the legal system is cost. It's going to be crazily cheap to actually use AI instead of actually paying lawyer fees, if you have ever paid lawyer fees. And there's tons of papers on this, but we found that there's a lot less on how shame inhibits service seeking in the legal realm. But we kind of found a couple examples that were pretty promising. So I'll give you three. The first case is in cases of victims of sexual assault. So victims in these cases, they fear both outing themselves as a victim, and they fear outing others as their abusers because they're typically intimately related with the abusers. So one study showed that individuals who perceive any kind of stigma or guilt and who are victims of intimate partner violence are way less likely to seek institutional support. And when they do disclose, they use language that's very roundabout, indirect, and not very straightforward, and which actually inhibits them actually getting to the legal advice that they need. In another study, it was shown that people arriving in a shelter in 2004, only about a third of them actually had restraining orders against the people who were abusing them. So there's clearly a gap between the kinds of services that people likely want and the kinds of legal services that they have access to. The second case is in developing countries, inheritance norms are very strange. I believe in India, it's the norm to the sisters who are getting the inheritance from their parents are supposed to cede the inheritance to their brothers, their male offspring, and this is clearly a problem. And in those cases, the good sister thing to do is to cede the inheritance over, but they can't even seek legal ramification because that can be seen as something that is just beyond the pale, and it's something that a good sister wouldn't do. So clearly that's a case where shame prevents them from seeking their legal rights. Lastly, people are subject to scam in the US ever more frequently, and you're probably thinking like, just get grandpa off TikTok and the problem's just gonna be over overnight. It's not really the case. It does skew towards the elderly, but scams are getting really more complex, and you probably would be the victim of a scam if you received a call like this one woman did, and she received a phone call, and it was an AI-generated voice, but it was a very good AI-generated voice, and the voice mimicked her mother, and her mother was saying that she had been kidnapped, and she was an in-home nurse, so this sounded actually kind of plausible to the daughter, and they even mimicked the way the phone sounds when it gets further away from a person's face, and then the fictitious captors were saying how they were going to harm the mother if they didn't fork over the cash for the ransom. So unless you have mother issues, I don't think anyone in this room would probably doubt that. They would probably either send over the money or call their mom immediately. This is all to say that disclosing to others that you're a victim of a scam or any other kind of shameful information about abuse it's a shameful experience. And this causes barriers to form around actually accessing the legal system. In 2022, we see that scams cost about $9 billion. And a 2022 survey showed that, conducted by AARP, that only about 15% of people who were the victims of the scam actually reported it to the authorities. Another study showed that 30% would be very embarrassed to report that they'd been a victim of scams, even to authorities, not even just to like family and friends. This kind of brings us around to how the AI can help mitigate the shame in this context. Notice in every circumstance, shame prevents legal aid seeking from directly or indirectly, discreetly or indiscreetly, reporting one's victimhood, and besides all the specific forms of shame espoused above, the legal system adds shame on top of shame. It prevents you from controlling the litigation. It prevents you from controlling your image. It prevents you from controlling whether or not the information becomes in the public domain, depending on where you live. So it's a huge burden and cost in terms of shame to actually approach the legal system. So how are you supposed to even know how big of a cost you might be paying if you don't know what your legal rights are? The answer is AI. The kinds of features that this kind of system would need would be twofold. In the information gathering stage, which is kind of like before you talk to the lawyer, is where we're kind of proposing the AI to be deployed. So before you talk to a lawyer, this is to be distinguished between talking to an actual lawyer, which is kind of the formal process. So in the information gathering stage, you're kind of assessing what your odds are of winning the case, assessing what's going to happen, how it's going to proceed, and what kind of laws are going to be invoked. So that's where you kind of make the cost-benefit decision of whether or not you're going to talk to a lawyer. And once you talk to a lawyer, this is where the formal engagement process begins, where you actually get the ball rolling on the litigation, and the paperwork goes to the court, and you are paying huge legal fees. So people with either limited economic barriers or fear of being shamed, they can't frivolously engage with the legal system. It's just not feasible. There's too much barriers, there's too high costs. So you have to know exactly how much you're going to pay and how much you're going to get. It's a pretty basic thing you need to actually make a decision. We have in mind an AI that could provide the kinds of assessment of legal rights involved in the claim that you're making, and B, kind of a crude assessment of your percent chance likelihood of actually succeeding. This could be just collected from all of the case data. And then lastly, a kind of lay and interactive kind of component that would explain these kinds of features and what laws apply and what kind of cases have been treated similarly. So really, all the information that you want to know about whether or not you're going to pursue a claim, and it can tell you something like your claim is it's unlikely to actually succeed, it's likely to succeed, it's poor, some kind of explanation that you're going to understand. So these are the kinds of questions and clarifications you need, and that you actually need to actually make some kind of decision to actually speak to a lawyer. Citizens experiencing shame, they might be hesitant to approach that lawyer for the reasons I've just mentioned. And these kind of proposed capabilities for the AI align with the information that they actually need. It's the only way to actually make the informed decision. And under this kind of model that we're making, citizens otherwise who might otherwise have not pursued just a legal system can now actually enter into litigation if they so choose. Again, knowing that your odds of winning a legal case and then walking away is not exactly a bad outcome, in our opinion. So at this point, we kind of have to make a kind of reality check and ask ourselves if this is something that's near in the future. Everybody right now can already take out your phone and get legal advice, pretty general legal advice that's not probably perfect, but AI is doing a lot of actual legal work. For instance, Harvey AI It's doing a lot of legal work in a London-based firm where they have about 3,500 lawyers, and they ask it like 40,000 questions a day. So that's a pretty good database of kind of the legal notions in London and the UK that they can build on. And JusticeBot has been developed for use in Quebec for housing law. So it's specifically tailored to housing law in Quebec. And that's a totally free tool to use. And it gives a certain kind of assessment that I've been posing would be good for a more general use. So I have to kind of mention bias. It's an obvious kind of question that looms, and we might be able to kind of rejoice that the legal system is absolutely terrible at collecting any kind of data whatsoever. So a lot of the biases of the past won't creep in, but whatever data we feed the AI, it's going to create an output that's equally biased. If the data we give it leads to racist outcomes or racist advice, it is going to be racist. So that's a clear, obvious problem. And one problem that might emerge is that depending on someone's protected status, they might get different kinds of legal advice. Now, this might be a matter of settled opinion in the legal realm, but ethically, it doesn't seem exactly so settled. So if a judge is racist against your friend and you know your friend is going to court, you might be remiss not to mention that they might want to consider the plea deal before they do so because they might not actually win. So there's kind of two considerations here. The one of like wanting to give a fair kind of equal advice to everyone, and then a kind of concern of giving all the relevant information that could hinge on the case. So I would just like to wrap up. I'd kind of recapitulate my main thesis. So not all kinds of dehumanization are bad. AI legal advisor application within the law demonstrates this in a couple areas, the areas I've given. These are characterized by instances where human care induces shame and prevents legal aid seeking, and deploying AI advisors to inform those experiencing shame before they proceed to formal litigation seems like a beneficent form of dehumanization. Thanks.